What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the Paranormies present the Ahnenerbe Hour. I am Johnny Monoxide, and tonight we're going to have a bit of an interview show. Scott and I recorded an interview with a friend of ours, Ms. Julie. Before we get to that, we got a few emails, a few donations to go over. We got an email, Season 3 feedback. All right, love your shows. This is from Jack Ripper. Love your shows. I love being able to get into all the good points of conspiracy theory or event in 2 hours. I would have a little bit of a suggestion for part 2. Please do more research and be better equipped for the next show. Wow. Okay. All right, Jack. Thanks for the update. We got some stuff going. It's going to be going towards the next Around the Campfire. We have 2 episodes of that out right now, and putting together season 3, episode 3. And all right, this is from Patson, and it says, "Hey, just want to say I love your YouTube channel. Recommend it to all my friends. Will you ever cover tulpmancy and other degenerate mind-bending activities?" I don't know if we're going to get into too many degenerate activities on the show. We'll leave the degeneracy to those other shows, which shall remain unnamed. Got one from HF. The title is, "Henlo, go eat some spaghetti and garlic bread." All right. Howdy. Love the show, but 95% of the paranormal cases you take on have much more simple, probable explanations. It wouldn't be much fun if you didn't run with the speculation, though. We have an Occam's razor. Okay. RE, the missing 411. I have a criminal justice background, even taught forensics, scene processing part-time for community college. However, I'm hardly a bona fide homicide dick. All right. Here's what can be difficult for laymen to understand in many cases. Most, in fact, of inexplicable deaths, missing persons, etc., they confuse how and why. How can be painfully obvious, even if there's little physical evidence, so the human, feminine response is to ask why. The lost Boy Scout, for instance. I don't know anything about the case except for what was said, but clearly the boy wandered off, got lost, panicked, and ran aimlessly. His strange behavior is hardly abnormal. Children and adults may have complex and unintuitive stress responses. As a kid, I almost spent the night lost in a German castle museum. How could a kid go missing for 16 hours in a crowded German tourist prison with everybody looking for him? It weren't no Bigfoot, and it weren't no Martians. It were a shallow understanding of child psychology. I was scared, and I was going to get in trouble when I saw all the grown men in uniforms looking concerned, which I thought was mad. Scanning for me, I hid. The harder they looked for me, the higher I climbed, and it wasn't deliberate. It was just more scared of getting in trouble than being lost or stuck. If I responded the same way in the forest during winter, some truffle hunter might be discovering my remains right now, or I'd be another missing kid story mentioned on the Paranormies. Oh, really? Yours, Hate Farmer. Wow. Don't know if that's a fan mail or a neg or what, but whatever. All right, one more from Conrad. And it says, "Hey, you guys need to go deeper into cool stuff like the rise demand of esoteric occult stuff focused on spirituality in the 1800s in Western Europe, perhaps tied in with Maria Orsic, Vril Thule Society, and the occult origins of the NSDAP would be interesting. Like, I'm talking full on, we was Aldebarians and shit. Oh yeah, I'd love to hear Mike get on the show so you guys could talk about Jews. Speaking of Jews, can you really expand on and go into Jewish stuff as a theme? I've always been a shitlord in real life, but due to Jews flipping over Trump, like Tim Wise reacting to Charlottesville and the ADL censoring YouTube, along with the international attack on the Stormer, I feel like there's an untapped demand you could fill by deconstructing Judaism. Oh yeah, could you also do a mention of Terry Davis? There's probably a lot of nice drops if you did the deep dive into him. Peace out, CIA niggas." Oh, Terry Davis, yeah. We can look into that. All right, that's enough of the emails for now. We got a couple of donations. Thanks, Goyim. We got 30. It says, "Johnny and crew, after the fellows at TDS announced their intent for the ethno state to have a ban on alternative healing and then cucked on 9/11 all in the course of 1 week, no less. I have no choice but to..." Well, this is a long one. Yeah, so let's just say they donated $30 to us. Thanks, Mike. We're trying to work on our website and get all the other stuff together, put together a merchandise store with t-shirts, hoodies, that kind of stuff. Fidget spinners. I mean, hey, would you guys buy Paranormies fidget spinners? I know Ignis would. So we're going to do that. And there was another one. It was, here it is. Alphonse sent us $100. Thanks, Alphonse. We got a lot of good comments on our, and a lot of bad comments on our Building 7 9/11 episode, the season opener this year. We're going to go into more 9/11 stuff this season. I just thought, Scott and I and everybody, Adam and everybody else that's not here, thought that it'd be great to start with the Building 7 is basically, it's a slam dunk of a subject when it comes to 9/11 because no plane hit it. It's the first building in the history of the world to ever come down completely by fire. High-rise building to ever come down by fire. At the time of its building, it was the most state-of-the-art building in the United States with fire suppression systems that apparently didn't work that day, and a lot of other stuff. 250 tons of supporting I-beam steel per floor that apparently collapsed due to fire that NIST couldn't even model on their computers. So yeah, Building 7 was an easy one for us. That's why we wanted to start with that. There's other stuff. I mean, we could get into, we can and will get into the Pentagon, Shanksburg, the other stuff. The fact that there were multiple government drills running that day, not just FEMA drills, but military drills, which is one of the reasons why there were no airplanes scrambled and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of stuff. So let's just say that the Paranormies and others at TRS have differing opinions on 9/11. So that being said, thanks for joining us again, Glam. And we're going to play the interview with Scott, myself, and our friend Julie. And we'll talk to you later. Well, we're here today with Mr. Scott Taylor. What's up, Scott?
Hello.
And our friend Julie. Hi, Julie.
Hello.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay. And you? I'm doing fine.
I'm good. How you doing, Scott?
I'm good. We're recording from an undisclosed location in my kitchen.
An underground bunker in Scott's kitchen. Yeah. But we have Julie with us, a good friend of ours from the show, and you wanted to talk about something specific to the month of September and the paranormal, right?
Yes. This current month is the ghost month in Taoism and Thanism and most Eastern folk religions, such as Shinto too. They also do it, and it's a lunar month. As you know, it's based on the lunar calendar. It starts this year on the 22nd of August and ends on around 15th of September. Full moon being the 5th. And the reason why it is called the Ghost Festival is because it is considered that in this particular month, the veil between the living and the dead is very thin, in a sense that in some cultures they say that it's the gates of hell that opens, that release all of the spirits there. Or in other cultures, it's more like the difference between the different realms of the dead and the living merges together and converges. I think it's similar to the concept of All Hallows Eve, except it takes throughout an entire month.
So, is it dependent on the cycles of the moon then, or is it like the dates of the calendar?
No, it's strictly based on the moon.
Okay. So
it's called this is considered like the lunar July. It's like the 7th lunar revolution within a year. The 7th lunar month / cycle. So this is dependent on the moon. Like pretty much everything that is in the East when it comes to like folk religions and things like that, it's always based on the lunar calendar, except for maybe Japan, because they have some sort of like syncretism with Western faiths, in a sense that they kind of the Western faiths kind of stayed a bit longer in Japan than they were in other countries. So the Japanese also observe certain things that are dependent on the solar calendar, which is the Gregorian. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, in like for most Eastern faiths, it's everything is based on the lunar calendar.
Wasn't Japan kind of Christianized for a while in the 1800s? Did that happen before other Asian countries?
Yeah, that happened. I think Japan is one of the first Eastern countries that actually had a large Western influence. And obviously Japan was never fully Christianized. Mm-hmm. as the majority religion is still, if I'm not wrong, Buddhism and Shinto.
Mm-hmm.
But it was Christianized, or at least it came into contact with Western civilization and Christianity before most other Asian countries did, if I'm not wrong.
Right. So when you say that the veil between the living and the dead kind of weekends or lessens, or however you want to put it,
Yeah.
what does that mean really? Does it just mean that the dead are more easily communicated with? They can come over easily? Like, how does that work?
They manifest themselves a lot more and are more easily seen, and can, for instance, there's a big idea that in this month it's easier for people to get possessed. It's easier for people to see things that they usually would not see, or they would see things more clearly. Like they would, for instance, they would be able to notice things like paranormal activity a lot more easily than they would otherwise. And for instance, there's a lot of superstitions that are surrounding this month in particular, like things people shouldn't be doing, things people should observe, because the idea is that during this month, those that will be the most troublesome, just, speaking of spirits, those that would be the most troublesome would be the hungry ghost, which is a concept that exists to mean ancestors that are forgotten, or people that were never given any proper burials, or died with no family. And usually these people, like these ghosts, are seen as being very, very present, and they will be scavenging basically for things like we would consider food, and also sort of like spirit food. Now, this includes others, living souls.
When you said there are certain things that people shouldn't be doing this month, or superstitions, or however you want to phrase it, what kind of things are seen to be avoided?
Oh, so there's usually one of the biggest things that people, especially they tell the children, is obviously not going out in the evenings unless absolutely necessary. They also tell you that, especially during this month, if you hear someone call your name, but you're not sure if that voice is really a voice or if you misheard or something, never answer it. That's actually one of the big things that we were always told as kids, and we were also told to not light candles at around midnight or later. We were also told to not go out at noon, like noon precisely, and not stay outside then, and better just stay inside. We were told to not burn incense at random locations or places, and
is that common,
and not to
burn incense in? Is it common to burn incense in random locations like that?
Well, people do like to sometimes, at least in Asia, they also like to burn incense in not necessarily any religious settings. People like to burn incense to just make things smell good, actually. Okay. So that's not recommended in that month. And you're also not supposed, especially kids, are not supposed to be picking up food or like candies or things that they see that fell outside, because usually those are most likely offerings for the hungry ghost.
So that's kind
and
of,
you're not supposed to
stealing from a spirit.
Yeah.
If you do that.
Yeah, and if you do that, you'd actually, people think that you might get possessed or followed home or something like that by the spirits. And the spirits that are the most present this month are not just ancestor spirits. For the worship of ancestors, we have other ceremonies and days for that. But this specifically is for the ghosts of the nameless dead. So the spirits of those that, killed themselves, people that died in accidents, people that were never buried properly, people that, ancestors that were long forgotten and not worshipped. So basically not given a place to, what we consider a place to stay or live.
Does that
or shelter.
calm them down when you do the ceremony? Like, do they kind of get what they want and then they are satisfied, or how does that work?
Well, no, it's well, yeah, in a sense that if you do the ceremony, which usually people actually do between the beginning of the month and the full moon, if you do that, I mean, the ceremony for this month, if you do it, then it does sort of like calm and helps the hungry ghost in a sense that it's like seen as a work of charity,
Is
religiously speaking.
Is that the ceremony where they burn the money?
Well, not exclusively. This, of course, they burn a lot of things like money and actually cardboard houses, paper cars, paper clothing. That is also done during the full moon of this month, but it's usually also done throughout other ceremonies. But this time, it's specifically dedicated for the nameless dead.
Okay.
So usually when you do it in other ceremonies, it would be for your ancestors specifically, which are not nameless dead. But otherwise, for this month, it is sort of like seen as a charitable act towards the dead that have nothing, that just roams the land.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So one of the things that you mentioned was not to go outside or not to follow someone calling your name if you're not really sure if it's your name or whatever. That seems to be pretty common in, was it like Native Americans with their skinwalkers and all that kind of stuff? At least the internet stories, I don't know the actual reality of it, but that seems to be something that ghosts and spirits tend to do a lot, is call people's names to kind of lure them out into the woods, or I guess the jungle in this case. So have you heard stories of that happening to people where they, think they hear something and they wander off and they're not heard from again? Yeah,
I actually have heard of such stories, and in Vietnam in particular, we have this idea that a person's soul has several parts, and some of these hungry ghosts, or even like in our religion, a hungry ghost can become a demon if left embittered. Like a person that committed suicide in our religion is considered a person that could actually turn into a full-blown demon, because they are chained to this earth with their anger and their bitterness and all of the negative emotions, to the point where they kind of forget what it is to be a human, and then they turn into pretty much they transform themselves into an animalistic state. And those are considered demons, for instance. And same with people that may have died of murder or rape, or basically unnatural and violent deaths. Mm-hmm. that will give a lot of resentment. And we have this concept where these sort of like these type of human-made demons would actually go around Rome and would feed on somebody's soul and even steal a part of it. And this is one of what we consider one of their methods, would actually be to prey on someone by making them respond to them or acknowledge their presence. This includes the method where they would call someone in the dark and make it sound like, it's somebody familiar calling you, mm-hmm. but then it's not. And there are instances, like I have heard many stories of this happening. And like I had a friend that actually told me this one, for instance, where when he was driving out at night with a couple of friends, there was this one guy who insisted that they stop the mopeds, because they were all riding on mopeds on the road. That's a common means of transportation. And one of his friends asked him to stop the moped, because he was pretty sure that someone was calling him, and his friends were like, no, like there's nothing, I didn't hear anything, but the guy stopped anyways. Mm-hmm. And he went into what was like a bamboo bush, it was in the middle of the night, and they were near fields and stuff, and bamboo bushes are very common, like a large, sort of like almost small bamboo forest. It's very easy to get lost in those, by the way. And the guy went in there, and his friends didn't follow him because they were actually kind of spooked, because people are quite superstitious, and there is an association with bamboo bushes and things like that at night. But the guy that went inside, he didn't believe in it, so he went in, and he didn't come out until 20 minutes later. And when he came out, he just didn't respond to anybody. Like, he looked really pale. He looked like a walking corpse. He looked extremely pale, and he was just kind of like gazing off in the distance. He didn't respond to anybody, and his friends were like, they got really worried. The guy just kind of collapsed right there, and they kind of called the ambulances because, he just kind of syncoped and everything. So they picked him up and they brought him to the hospital and everything. The guy woke up, he was okay, but he never wanted to quite describe what he's seen in that bush, except for the fact that he's now kind of like paranoid and convinced that there's something that's following him all the time and preying on him.
So
yeah,
it doesn't kill you per se, but it does do something to you.
Scares the shit out of you.
It does do something. Like for some people, they become we think that for some people they become insane.
Mm-hmm.
Like they lose some of their mental faculties like that. I also, as a child, I also lived in a sort of like a haunted house. And, we kind of, my parents, my father rented that house because we were kind of like temporarily moving from one place to another, as we were actually building our proper house on a piece of land that we bought. So we were living on a house that we were renting, and we just like rented it for maybe 6 months. And we had live in, like a helpers, maids. That's kind of common in third world countries, actually. Like, women that, or, people that come from the countryside, and then they live in the house in the city, and they are, household helpers and maids and cleaners and things like that.
Right.
Or nannies and nursemaids. And we had a maid that, and that house was haunted because a lot of people actually experienced very weird things in it. In my own bedroom, I often dreamt of a man that hanged himself, but he was just lonely and he was talking. And as a kid, I wasn't really scared because it was just weird, because I was like 8. Mm-hmm. But this happened because, there was a man that hanged himself, and I think he actually hanged himself in the ceiling from my bedroom, and I think it was from some sort of ceiling fan or something. But one of my maids experienced this, is that at night, she kept hearing someone call her name, and she thought it was from the front gate. So she would go downstairs to try and check. But then there was another maid that held her back and said, "No, there's nothing. Do not go out." And then my maid just kept saying, "No, I'm pretty sure there's someone, like there's a relative that's calling me from outside the gate." And she would keep trying to go there, and she kept being held back by our other employees at the time, because they sort of like knew that this was not a good thing, because it was like at 2 a.m. or something. And she kept saying that she was being called from the same spot, and other people in the house have seen like a shade that stood there at night sometimes, like some sort of weird shadow of a person. And he kept calling to her specifically.
So this is these are all like well-known things to not go when you hear people calling you. Like, is this something that everyone knows about?
Yeah, like at least in where I came from, it's something most people know, and they tell their children not to do. Like if you hear someone call you that sounds weird but sounds familiar, do not respond to them. Just keep walking to whatever direction you were heading, but don't respond. Don't turn back. Don't respond to them.
Right.
That's a cautionary thing that parents tell their kids.
Okay. So has this, you mentioned the guy that went in the bamboo bush and kind of got part of his soul sucked out, or, whatever happened to him.
Yeah.
Has this happened to a lot of people that you know of, or have you heard a lot of these stories?
Oh, I've heard a lot of these stories. Like, actually, there was something sort of like similar that happened to, I think it was she was a second cousin who kind of like went out in the rain and then she also kept hearing, well, I think she kept hearing someone, she kept hearing her husband call her, and she kept following that voice. But when she came home, she just, she broke into a fever for a few days, and then she just snapped. Now, I don't know if it's actually, if it was, an actual paranormal experience, or if she got like a disease or something, like a fever. Yeah, but that's how it started anyways. And that was before she got to learn. I mean, that was before everybody got to learn that her husband actually died 7 days before that event occurred. And they only got news then because he died in a, I think he died in a construction project, and there were some problems with news delay at the time with the mail or something.
So do you think it could have been like his ghost, maybe?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, you just think it is
I don't
using his voice or whatever.
Yeah, well, I think it was something preying on her.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty common thing. What other?
I think this.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was saying, I think this is actually pretty common in most animistic or sort of like non-Abrahamic cultures. Actually, this concept of a demon type of spirit that would, pretend to be someone familiar and call you out just to prey on you, like some sort of spiritual predator.
One other thing you mentioned that I thought was interesting was you said that you're not supposed to go out at midnight and you're not supposed to go out at noon. Is that like
yes.
when the veil is weakest, or however you want to phrase that?
Yeah, I think it's when, at least in our culture, is seen as when the veil is weakest. And I think that's because, for instance, in Europe, it's never quite the noon thing. I think it's always more like the midnight thing, right? If I'm not wrong.
Yeah, Western ghosts really don't come out during the day, as far as I know.
I don't.
But
hauntings during the day, really.
Mm-hmm.
But my theory is that this, and I've encountered, and this seems to be a thing that is in, especially in Southeast Asia. I can't really speak of other countries that are situated near the equator, but at around noon, you have blinding sun. You cannot see. It's literally blinding. You barely see anything, especially in the height of summer. So it would make sense why this would be also seen as a very, where, things like spiritual predators would show up, because what's in common between noon and midnight in equatorial countries is that tropical countries is that you can't see anything then, basically.
That's interesting. So it's not even so much the light that keeps in the way as it is being able to see.
Yeah, I think the idea is that when you see, when you're able to see clearly, then things like shadows and shapes don't get weirdly confounded. Well, if you don't see very clearly, that's when, at least we think that's when, a sort of like a spiritual predator can blend in with the shadows and make things look strange or blurry, and you won't be able to detect it. It's almost like a hunting strategy, in a sense.
Yeah, it is kind of what it sounds like to me, some sort of predatorial camouflage or something.
Yeah.
Now, what sort of personal experiences have you had? Have you had anything happen to you yourself? I mean, I know you mentioned the dreams you had of the guy who hung himself.
Yes.
What other sorts of things have you had happen to you?
Oh, I've seen a lot of things. I used to actually work in partially. I used to work in a Thanis temple as sort of like I was an ordained priestess, actually, like a shaman. And this is something that usually runs in family, in a sense that it's an inherited position in our religion in most cases. Mm-hmm. And so I had to deal with things like, and I had to follow some of my elders, and we often had to deal with things like hauntings and, what was considered paranormal activity, hauntings, sightings, people that got possessed. We also had to perform things like exorcism.
Okay, so you've seen a whole lot of stuff then.
So you've actually performed an exorcism?
Yeah, I have several times. Also, several house cleansing rituals that I also did because houses that were possessed or haunted by demons or just spirits that could not be laid to rest. So I've seen my fair share of things. Okay. And I can probably talk about some of the things I've seen. Actually, one of the biggest experiences we've had was exorcism. With exorcism was when there was a case of a woman in not that far actually from the temple I was serving at the time, from the shrine that I was serving at the time, and I followed one of my elders. In this case, it was my grandmother actually, but I followed one of my elders because we were kind of cold because there was something really strange happening in the village. And it was basically this woman that was walking out with her friends. And they both saw something really weird approaching them. It was like and it was, brightly at noon, really. So they saw something sort of like really weird approaching them, some sort of like weird shape, like a humanoid type of shadowy figure with sort of like strangely bent articulation, like how can I say that in English, like limbs, like strange
limbs, and it's kind of walking funny, and I get what you're getting at.
Yeah, it has like a forward hunch. It looked very skinny, and it had very long limbs and was walking funny towards them. And it was kind of like it kind of blended in the shadows.
I'm picturing.
So it wasn't like really.
I'm picturing that Adam running gif.
Oh,
right now.
Yeah.
Gangly.
The virgin.
Sort of like gangly, but I think with maybe longer front limbs. And her friend freaked out really bad because there are there was a local legend about such a creature. And her friend freaked out really bad, and she ran back without turning back. So she kind of ditched her friend there, to be honest. So that was kind of an ass move. But she kind of ran back to the village, and she was like telling people that she saw this happen, and people were starting to freak out and getting really angry. She just left her friend there, like just ditched her there, and. Her friend came back to the village in the evening, but she looked very weird, and she kind of came home, and she just made this sort of like weird, screechy, hole-like sounds where she just got, she literally jumped the fence into her home, and then she... kind of like there's no other way to put it, but she actually tried to kill her own children.
Oh, wow.
In that house.
Oof.
Yes, like she was actually, holding out a knife. She was trying to kill her own children, and her husband managed to get home. He saw that and he managed to stop her. And that's when other people in the village were like, oh, wait, didn't that other girl ditch you, outside when she saw this sort of like weird, funky thing approaching? That's what they were saying, and people started actually holding and chaining her up because she was literally clawing herself out, like her skin was bleeding. She had scratch marks all over her body
from herself.
Yeah, on herself. And she was really intent on killing her own children. She kept saying about, like, she kept, talking about how she actually wanted to murder them, like strangle them and, stab them and a bunch of other things like that. And that's why the elder and I had to go there, because people were saying, okay, you need to come down here. We think someone got really possessed by one of those creatures. And we actually performed an exorcism. And that lasted a few hours because she just screamed like she was demented. And she kept going on and on and on. And it didn't stop. And she was screeching. And I was actually, since I was kind of inexperienced, I was actually kind of spooked out by that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Like we had to use I was pretty spooked out, and I wasn't alone though, because there was like there was a large group of people who were watching what was happening, because it's a small village, news travel fast. People hear, okay, this person got possessed, let's go and check it out, let's see what happens. That's what people do. So it took a few hours, and by the end, when the elder kind of sealed the exorcism and ended it, we saw something, and I saw something on the wall crawl out of her. And I didn't see an actual physical creature as much as I saw a shadow of a creature that looked like what the other girl described, that crawled out of her body. And the elder asked me if I saw that, and I said, of course I did, as plain as day. And some people saw it and others did not. But we saw the thing crawl out of her.
How big was the shadow?
It was roughly the size, like it was 185 centimeters. I think that's like 6 foot, maybe a bit taller.
Okay.
With really long limbs.
Full human-sized shadow.
Yeah. It was full human size with really long and really long and really, sort of like thin limbs.
Spindly.
Gangly, spindly, thin limbs, long fingers that ended like claws. And we saw that shadow sort of like get out of her body and screech, and then it just went away.
Did it like go into like a dark corner and disappear, or did it like run up the wall, or did it just poof, was gone, or?
It sort of like slowly rose from her body, that was what I saw from the wall, on the wall, because I didn't see anything from her body as much as I saw that figure rise from her body. And then the next 2-3 minutes, like it was crawling and trying to like crawl outside, like almost like scratching on the wall. In a sense that it was slowly getting out of her body. Then it tried to sort of like reach for an opening in the house, but then it disappeared. And that's when the elder kind of fully completed the ritual. So it was normal, at least from what we believe. It was banished. She's okay though.
I was gonna ask if she was back to normal after this thing left.
Yeah, the next day, like she was maybe like she ended up sleeping and blacked out for 10 hours, 12 hours, something. But then she was okay, but she did not remember a single thing.
Well, you just answered my next question. I was curious if she had remembered any of that.
No, she did not remember anything.
Wow.
She just thought that she blacked out in the sun.
What happens during one of these exorcisms? Like, what's the process? I mean, I have to assume it obviously doesn't involve any crucifixes. Or
right, there's the power of
no, it doesn't. But we have you ever seen like Taoist or generally Asian talismans where people there's like a series of sort of like letters that is stuck on yellow or red paper that people stick on walls.
Okay, no, I've never seen those. They put letters on the paper and then put the paper on the wall.
Yeah, it's actually an amulet or a talisman, and I don't know, are you familiar at all with Japanese horror movies? Because these kind of pop out usually then, like really? People,
I know what you're talking about now. They kind of put them up like to ward stuff away, right? As the
yeah.
Do they put them on like the door frames and stuff?
Mm-hmm. I believe so, right?
Yes, those.
Okay, I think I know what you're
those.
talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, it involves like setting up basically a proper place where we would actually ward the five directions in our religion, because we have each direction is actually associated with one specific element, and it's a 5-direction thing. So we actually would have to have, like, firstly a talisman that is dedicated to locking in each specific direction in a room. So we would stick it on a measured portion of the wall, and then we just have to make sure that it follows the compass where each of these talismans would be stuck, so that it contains whatever is inside in that wall.
So you would put 5 talismans around the room to represent the 5 different directions.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's how you start, because usually, especially if it's something bigger, then you have to have a containment zone, in a sense. And then we actually have to sprinkle things like salt on every corners of the room, and even sometimes create a salt circle or a silver circle, what we call it, in a sense that we would put silver coins also at the 4 different corners of the room, or right underneath the talismans, depending on the situations. So the preparation is actually quite elaborate. We have to be quite.
I was gonna say the salt is common to a couple of different rituals besides like the Asian, but like for removal rituals in general, there's the salt circle is popular.
Yeah, I mean, salt.
Yeah,
I'd heard of. One thing, if I can digress real quick, that I think is interesting, you have 5 points that correspond to. You said they correspond to elements. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I know in Western systems, typically, I mean, there's 4 elements in Western systems: earth, wind, water, and fire. And those correspond to, north, south, east, and west. So I think it's interesting that you have 5.
Yeah, actually, this is also something that we have in common with Shinto and Taoism, is that we have earth, we have wood, actually, like tree. Like wood, we have fire, we have metal, we have water.
Okay.
So that's 5 elements. And these 5 elements interact in a very specific manner. And they're not really just associated with directions, but they're also associated with other things too. It's also something that we also link to astrology and things like that. So it's a very complex system.
Right. Okay.
And according to us, we have in every direction, in every 5 direction, there is a specific set of ghosts and deities that are dedicated to them.
Now, how do the directions work? Do you have like north and then like northeast, or like do they clearly fit onto a compass or not?
We have our own compasses, actually.
Oh, okay.
I actually don't I actually don't remember the specifics here, but north is actually.
If you don't remember,
But I think
I just thought it was interesting that you have 5 directions.
Yeah, like north is associated with wood, and then there's fire, which is east, I think. And actually, we don't have a full south direction. We just have earth, which is like southeast, and then we got metal, which is southwest, and then water, which is west.
Okay.
So we don't have a full south direction.
So are they spread kind of like in the same dimensionally as like a 5-pointed star, how they're all kind of equal?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a 5-pointed star.
That was something else I was curious about. It seems like it kind of matches like a pentagram or something like that.
Yeah.
So
it does match a pentagram. It is a pentagram shape, actually, come to think about it.
That's it, I'm out. No. Wait, this is the witchcraft show. Okay, no, go ahead.
So you salt all the areas in the room, and you put silver coins down, what typically happens next?
The afflicted is usually then brought into the room. Now, before we do that, we do have a preparations where we ourselves are covered in amulets. We also have to be very clean. We also have to have taken usually like a salt bath, like a bath in salt water. We have to be clean. We also have to be covered with a bunch of objects that would be associated in Asian culture with positive energy, because negative energy is associated with the realm of the dead. So we had to wear very vibrant colors. Have things like, we even have like a bunch of bells on our bodies, like chimes and anything that makes movement resound. Basically anything that makes a place or something sounds alive.
Okay.
And we have a specific set of mantra where we recite before we actually put the afflicted in the circle.
So it's
and the person is usually chained.
It's like dealing with a grizzly bear or something, where you have to be like as loud as possible.
I was just going to ask you that about the restraints. So they are restrained; they're chained.
Yes, you have to. Usually, they have to be, or else they can get quite violent.
Right. I've seen like Catholic exorcisms where they have this subject like, strapped to what looks like an executioner's chair, like the electric chair with the arm straps and the leg straps and whatever. Do you usually, are they chained to something specifically, or is it to a chair, or just chained in handcuffs, or?
Just chained, handcuffs, basically anything you have on hand, because we can't really be very elaborate, especially if it's if it's some sort of emergency. As long as it holds and it's strong, it works. Like in that case, it was absolutely an emergency since the woman tried to kill her children.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. I've heard, I only know of the Catholic type exorcisms, but like where they get like some sort of superhuman type strength, and that's why you have to restrain them. Has that happened with the same kind of possession?
Yeah, definitely.
Those little skinny things give you like super strength.
Yeah, definitely. It especially in many cases, the person will act like they're much stronger than they usually are. I think these things kind of make them go to the limit of what their body is possible, which kind of gives them, in a sense, super strength.
Have they been tested for PCP?
Well, what's PCP?
I'm joking.
Okay.
It's a drug that in the inner cities, police officers have had to. It takes like 4, 5, 6 guys to take a guy down because they all of a sudden have, seem to have super strength. Or the stuff that makes you jump off, think you can fly, and that kind of stuff. So.
Oh, okay. Well, that sounds kind of weird.
It makes inner city youths eat their own face.
Yeah,
stuff like that.
Jesus.
So I have to assume that once you start the ritual, the possessed immediately tries to escape or cause fights.
Yeah, in most cases, because we will be citing things like specific mantras, including some Buddhist mantras that are actually associated with things like exorcism, such as the mantra of Bodhisattva Chundi, and some other mantras like that. And we also, we also pass things like candles around. And we also usually have a small setup altar that we take with us. Yeah, I actually forgot to mention that as a setup to a small setup altar that we take with us that is dedicated to several war gods that are also responsible for things like protecting the realm of the living. Yeah, and so we also have to pray to them and ask for help in most cases. Especially in the more difficult ones, we have to ask for help. So that involves mantra, a lot of different mantra recital, a mixture of both native folkish folkish native mantras, but also Buddhist text, certain types of Buddhist mantras.
So it's kind of a syncretic thing where you take a little bit from different religions.
Yeah, that's why Asian religions are very difficult to study compared to Western religions, because Buddhism just have a tendency of mixing with local faiths and local, like, folk faiths. For instance, Christianity has a tendency of basically just exterminating local faiths.
Mm-hmm.
This does not happen in most cases with Buddhism at all, because it just kind of mixed together with the local faiths. So people end up being Buddhist, but also Shinto, or also Taoist, or also believe in the Mongol faith or something like that. Because in Buddhism, there's nothing that actually contradicts the existence of folk faiths or gods or whatever, as much as it just says, it just sort of like imposes or mixes in with the local religions.
Yeah,
so most
like
Asian faiths are very syncretic.
It seems like Buddhism kind of gives almost like a superstructure to whatever faith it's dealing with. Like, yeah, here's these spirits, and they're also trapped in this cycle of rebirth and stuff like that. Is that? Would you say that's it?
That's precisely what it is.
Does any of these religions seem to be more effective than others, or do you kind of just throw everything at the spirit and see what sticks?
It's a bit hard to say, actually, because
would it matter if the ghost was of another religion? Like, does that, like, if it had practiced a different religion while it was alive, or?
No, it doesn't seem to matter that. As in, all exorcisms been involved in seem to have been successful. I think there are some elements that are pretty universal in the practice of exorcism, and that's why I kind of think that it's more due to conviction in faith than it is due to other things.
The conviction and faith of the exorcist, do you mean?
Yeah, in a sense that if the person actually really believes that they are going to be successful in the exorcism. And actually, that's the point of mantras. Mantras in Buddhism is basically internalizing a message in most cases. Like, you recite a mantra because you want to internalize something of a spiritual nature.
Kind of,
and so if you have...
send it to your subconscious in a way?
Yeah. So, like, if you have, a very strong faith in something, I think that definitely helps.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me almost of, in a lot of, like, Western occults or magic systems, that's one of the, I don't want to say beliefs, but that's kind of one of the key points with a lot of them, is that faith is essentially a tool, or belief is a tool to allow you to do whatever it is you want to do. So it almost doesn't matter if you're praying to, like Bugs Bunny, or you're praying to, a local folk god or deity. It seems like it's almost the act of doing it and the faith itself that seems to be what works.
Well, yeah, at least my personal belief is that if you associate, like, if you pray to something hard enough and you kind of like associate their existence or their actions with something specific, and that you have a lot of faith in it, then that thing will kind of become true.
Yeah, no, I believe that as well.
Or else I can't really explain why an exorcism in Thanism would be as successful as a Shinto exorcism, for instance, or other rites. Like, if there isn't some degree of universality in how it is done, or what powers is it, then I can't really explain why something would have the same level of success everywhere.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, Catholic exorcisms, I mean, it's the same thing. You have to get someone who has a lot of faith in the religion.
Right.
And the setup is even kind of the same. They have their, maybe this might be offensive to Catholics, I don't know, but they have their amulets and such with the crucifix. You have mantras that you recite, or, Bible verses in this case. And it all seems to kind of basically work the same way. It's just kind of the window dressing on the act of faith itself.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like
and
if you've ever seen, I mean, I know I'm basing this off of like videos and movies and stuff, but like like in The Exorcist, like the priest, um, it was like when he felt that his faith was breaking down, the demons started to win. You know, he had to like, you know, redouble his faith in God and whatever to get the demon out of the girl. And I've seen, like I said, I've seen those videos on like the Italian exorcisms, and they talk with the priest afterwards, before and afterwards, and like you can see that they're like visibly and physically drained from doing that. You know, like they're putting physical effort into believing.
Well, I remember listening to Art Bell. He used to have an exorcist on named oh God, I can't remember his name right now, but that was one of the things that the priest had said, was it like physically drains you to do this. He compared it to being a parent, in that you have to kind of like give something of yourself, like you give up a piece of yourself every time you do one of these, because it's so physically exhausting.
Takes some of your mana.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the experience you've had as well?
That with exorcism and things like that being exhausting or tiring?
Yeah, just draining and exhausting, however you want to phrase it.
Yes, that I tend to, after when I do something like a big ritual like that, I tend to get extremely tired. Yes, that's very true. It feels like I actually, you know, ran a marathon or something. Mm-hmm. In terms of physical exertion, it feels like it's probably because I've given a lot of energy into doing such a thing, because it has to come from somewhere, in a sense. Mm-hmm. And I feel exhausted, and I could probably sleep especially in the heavier cases, I could probably sleep for days and just eat and sleep, basically.
Right. With heavier, well, before I get to the heavier cases, something interesting to me is that with the exorcisms, like we talked about how it seems to be more the faith that's the key component, but at the same time, you are still dealing with something that is real. Like, I don't think the exorcisms, yes. I don't personally think the exorcisms are a product of the possessed imagination. I don't think it's a schizophrenia or anything like that. I do think it's something, maybe not physically real, but something that is, you know, real. I don't know. I kind of think it's interesting how, for whatever reason, the faith doesn't matter, yet you're dealing with something that does seem to have an actual existence. So
yes, and
I'm curious about what's so repulsive to these creatures.
At least in our culture, it's seen as certain elements, like you know, like how if there's a lot of negative energy, basically considered with the, like, what is basically the dead, and what is the realm of the dead. If there's too much imbalance of that, then it is it can cause things like possessions, or you know, it helps with possessions, or usually if a person is possessed, then they have a lot of accumulated negative chi. Actually, that's a specific term in Feng Shui. But if you have faith, or if you have something, and that's why we use all of these very vibrant colors. Like when we do exorcism, if you have faith, a very strong faith, it's something like faith is something of the living, in a sense. Mm-hmm. And if you have a lot of it, then you kind of balance out the negative chi with the positive one. So it restores balance. At least that's our belief system. Things like
what causes this negative chi? Is it just a lot of like negative thoughts being built up over time, or can it be?
No, chi is actually in Asian beliefs, usually, especially in Feng Shui, chi is the ambient energy.
Okay.
And it's like a cosmic force. And the fact that the cosmos is made of a balance between the positive and the negative chi. And there are certain elements associated with positive chi, including life force. And
so
negative chi.
Like, to use a parallel, something like ether in Western systems?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually never thought of it like that, but
It's something
yes,
kind of
I would say it's
pervades
like ether.
throughout. So it's kind of something that just kind of pervades throughout reality itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for instance, there are places where negative chi will gather more, and there are places where positive chi will gather more. And it's not a bad or a good thing in a sense that if you have a bedroom, for instance, positive chi, you won't have restful sleep. But if you have a bedroom with too much negative chi, you might get sick easily, or just get tired and lethargic, or have your life force drained. So it's everything, at least, is about, in our belief system, is about balancing out the negative and the positive chi.
Okay. That's really interesting to discuss this concept of balance or a middle way. I'd been doing a lot of reading on lately on Western occult systems and things like that, and that's kind of one of the things that pops up there as well, is this idea of there being like two pillars. Like I think it's Gemini, maybe, that has the astrology sign is like two pillars.
And the Gemini's the twins.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is. It's usually
it's
the
twins. There's twin pillars. You see it a lot in like tarot cards and things like that. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting to see these things kind of pop up in different cultures and different belief systems.
Yeah, and I personally think that's because there is some universality to certain things, like forces in the cosmos or something like that, like or faith. Actually, even the use of salt, at least in every cultures I've been to, have been associated with exorcism and cleansing.
Universal as well.
Well, salt's universal for a lot of reasons. I mean, at one point it was used as currency. It's considered holy in some, some civilizations. Yeah, it's been around. It's been around since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Garlic too.
Garlic.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the garlic keeps the vampires away too.
Yeah, but in Asia too, we sometimes, actually during the Ghost Festival, the Ghost Month, people sometimes would carry things like garlic in their pockets because they think it will prevent bad spirits from following them home.
Interesting.
One interesting thing about salt, especially, is it's a very elemental thing. Like, it's just sodium chloride. It's two molecules, and it seems like things that are really elemental or fundamental, salt, water, things like that, always seem to have a lot more significance in spiritual matters versus something really complicated like, I don't know, gasoline or something like that.
I think that maybe it's because it's just a single unit element or something.
Yeah, like it's so basic,
Although something that is complicated, that seems to be a recurring theme in different cultures, is gunpowder.
Oh, really? I had not heard gunpowder before. Well, isn't gunpowder, didn't that used to be made of saltpeter or something like that? I'm not a chemist.
Yes.
Someone in the comments.
It's made of saltpeter and...
Okay.
Well, the thing is that at least in Asia too, we use crackers, like how do you call those little, firecrackers and these things, and they are usually made of actual gunpowder.
Right.
And we use those
in Asian festivals.
Yeah,
always lighting something
and
up.
it's to get rid of spirits and ghosts and things like that.
Okay.
And from what I
So
the
Chinese invented gunpowder, so it makes sense that they would have it in all their festivals and stuff.
Yeah, but in local folklore where I currently am, which is Norway, gunshots also gets rid of evil spirits.
Really?
Sound of gunshots, yeah.
Pull out the shotgun, get off my property, and pop a couple in the air?
Yeah, like the sound, like the loud banging sound actually gets rid of demons and things like that. So I'm thinking there might be something to gunpowder.
That's interesting. Well, let's take a little quick break, and then we can come back and talk more about that.
Yeah, we'll play a little bit. We'll play a song and take a quick little break, and we'll be back. How about that? This is Razor's Edge and Hate Society with Still Occupied. Everybody, we're back. This is still the Paranormies Presents the Ahnenerbe Hour. I'm still Johnny Monoxide with Scott Taylor and Julie. We're talking about Vietnamese Ghost Festival, Hungry Ghost Festival. Also, this takes place all over Asia, China, Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, Vietnam. Right? So it's not just indigenous to Vietnam.
No, this is something that happens in most Mahayana Buddhist countries, so most of Eastern Asia, actually.
Okay, and do you think is that because of the, would you call it Mahayana Buddhist?
Mahayana Buddhist.
Mahayana.
It's
I mean to mispronounce.
Yeah, that's well. I mean, if you're familiar, it's one of the branches of Buddhism. That one is mainly prevalent in East Asia, while Theravada is a bit more West Asia, I guess. Mm-hmm. But Mahayana Buddhism, it's I mean, it starts with the Ulambayana, I think that's how it was called. But it's a festival that occurs during this month that is a Buddhist festival in which a Buddha supposedly taught a disciple, one of his disciples, a monk, on how to save his own mother's soul. Because his mother was actually reborn in one of the lower realms, and she was basically turned into what would be considered a hungry ghost. And so Buddha taught that disciple how to save his own mother's soul, and since he managed to do so, it kind of also became a celebration of. It kind of became the Hungry Ghosts Festival as a consequence.
Okay, so
because
this is something you can kind of be brought back from then? Or do you need like the Buddha himself to bring you back from being a hungry ghost?
Oh, okay, like it's not something he can really bring back from. However, this disciple in particular was a clairvoyant. Like he had abilities, and he was told how to like what he could do to lessen his own mother's karmic price load, if you can put it like that, because apparently she has accumulated a lot of bad karma throughout her different lives, and she had to pay for all of it in one lifetime. So she was just delayed, basically, reincarnation and forced to roam the land as a hungry, nameless spirit.
So one way
And
to become a hungry ghost is to basically just accumulate enough bad karma.
yeah, partially that too. Like, there's so many ways, at least according to folklore and Buddhism, to actually remain bound as a hungry ghost. And during this month too, we actually have several mantras, especially during the festival, that we recite for these spirits, salvation, in a sense. So it is sort of like
purgatory or something in a Catholic sense, where you have to pray for the souls of the deceased to kind of help them out, I guess.
Yeah, in a way. But the reincarnation cycle is not really like it's something that can take over a span of 1,000 years. It could take over a few days or 1,000. Basically, like a spirit can linger in the realm of the dead before being reborn, or can linger on the earth before being reborn.
Is there any specific reason a spirit would do that? I mean, I know a lot of times with ghosts in Western culture, it seems like they have unfinished business or something like that.
Oh, definitely. That's definitely especially the case for the spirits that remain tied to the land. There are some very sort of like unfinished, it depends on the unfinished business. There are ancestor spirits that remain tied to the land because they want to watch over their, family members or some things like that. Like, for instance, if you had an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent that passed away that really, really cared for you, they might actually delay moving on so that they can watch over you. Like guardian spirits. So that's one type. But then there are others that just stay around because they feel like they have unfinished business, especially what we would consider the roaming ghosts or the roaming spirits of people. And this is where, people that died of very tragic deaths or suicide or things like that especially those feel like they cannot move on at all.
Right.
Because they're not at peace.
Do you think that might be part of the cause for the for leaving out the offerings, like the money and it's like I've seen pictures like paper cars, paper houses, and that kind of stuff. Is it like to pay their way out of their purgatory or whatever?
No, as much as it is to help them find. And usually people make things like offerings like cars and houses and stuff, usually to help these have a more comfortable stay, basically. Because in our belief, like if you burn something, and this also covers Eastern Asia, if you burn something that is of paper in which you attach significance to its shape, for instance, it's like a house, so you're basically giving somebody a house by burning it. So it's kind of like, I suppose, like transfer, but from the realm of the living to that of the dead.
Okay.
So when we do this during the festival, we do it because it's out of charity, actually, towards hungry ghosts. Well, if we do it during other months, it's basically an offering to our own ancestors most of the time.
Can you decide who it goes to, though? I mean, you mentioned it's usually an offering to your ancestors. If it was someone else of significance, like, say, a friend who died or something like that, could you also offer them something?
Oh yes, definitely. You just have to, make it known.
Right, just kind of designate who it's going to, I guess.
Yeah, you designate who it goes for. You write it on. Actually, we also have special paper for that, where we would write the specific mantra to. Usually, that is done by priests. It's not.
Okay.
But it's usually you go to a temple, you ask a priest, I have someone that died that I want to give something to. Can you make me that? Home, and then they will burn it alongside what they want to offer.
Okay. So it's almost like an astral postal service or something.
Yeah, actually, it's something that comes up. A lot of people, when they discover this, they do think, oh, this is like a transdimensional postal.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you wanna talk a little bit more about kind of some of your experiences? I mean, it's your episode, so whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, sure. I can talk about several of the things I've seen. I mean, I've gone to places that were haunted, and we were supposed to clean them up. And the house was basically haunted because it was built on a burial ground, actually. And people who bought the land, they did not know that. They built it there, and it was actually an old cemetery. And it was built specifically on an old grave of a woman that passed away there for reasons unknown. So it was a nameless grave. But basically, the people, they bought the house, they built the land, they built the house. And then they would, especially on the first floor, they would start seeing a woman cry against the wall at night, especially in the evenings. And she would come at specific times. I think it was at 8 p.m. or between 8 and 9 p.m. where she would pop up and stay there and cry against the wall.
Yeah.
And I was called in for that one. And I had to set up a ceremony, set up a small altar, set up a ceremony, and actually sort of enter a communion with the person, with the woman that was crying against the wall. And after all of the ceremonial things were set up and everything, she actually appeared against the wall. It was a south-facing wall. Yes, I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling, but she appeared then at roughly that time of the evening again, and I kind of basically I prayed to all the spirits that may be involved in house protection and things like that, and then when she popped up, I just had to try talking to her, actually, and that was weird because she had almost she looked like she was wearing a nightgown. Mm-hmm. And actually that's why Asian ghosts are all wearing white, by the way, because traditionally nightgowns are just white, so the more you know, it's always those white dresses.
Yeah, that is something a lot of Japanese horror movies and stuff, is it always seems to be dressed in white, the Ring, is that the one?
The Ring,
yeah. She's in white.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's others.
Yeah, there are other ones, but that's usually because the nightgown is usually traditionally white.
Even if the person died in a different colored outfit, when they come back as a ghost, it's almost always white. You never see a ghost in a blue taffeta dress.
Yeah. You never see that, do you? Like a fancy dressed up ghost.
No.
Yeah. Also, in most cases,
they died in a wedding dress or something, and they're still in their wedding dress or whatnot.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we
Sorry,
can.
Julie. Yes, go ahead.
We were cutting you off.
Sorry. Yeah.
Actually, it depends. For instance, if some people they died for a very long time, usually I assume that their clothes be washed out. But no, in most cases they don't actually wear white.
Okay.
Just for your information.
Oh, is that just Hollywood then?
Yeah, I think that's mainly Hollywood, and it's mainly because wear white when they go to sleep, and sleep is usually when you die or something like that. But that woman was specifically wearing white because she died in her sleep. and kind of had to talk to her, actually, and kind of figured out that she died roughly, 180 years ago, where someone actually broke into her small house, and she was living alone because she was a widow. And she was living on that piece of land, actually, and she was never given a proper burial. She was a widow with no children, and I think it was someone that kind of like entered her house at night, raped her, and strangled her, and then buried her there. Yeah. And and she didn't realize quite that she died, actually. Yeah, like she was just there, and she just thought that she was, like reliving the experience. And apparently that happened roughly at 8 or 9 p.m. That's why she would pop up at that spot and cry at night, because that's when it happened. That's when she was raped and killed.
Wow, so
while she was in her bed.
So she basically had to relive that every day for 180 years or however long. Yeah,
it's kind of like, like PTSD, except it doesn't end when you die.
Right.
And she also kind of wanted revenge, but she did not even know where to start it with. And it actually took some time, but we had to explain to her, because the other people that lived in the house, they also came and tried to talk to her properly and tried to calm her down and explain to her, because nobody apparently did it. Took the time to explain to her that this happened a very long time ago, and that the person she's looking for was most likely dead.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say he's been long dead too.
Yeah.
So was this like a full communication with this spirit, like a back and forth?
Yeah, it was a
conversation.
Yeah, it was a back and forth conversation.
Oh wow.
It wasn't like anything, like mystical or anything. It was actually, I actually made a specific ritual so that she would manifest more clearly in that hour, so that she could actually hold a conversation. And it was a back and forth conversation. And the laymen, or the people that were not involved with priesthoods that were there, also managed to ask questions.
Is it normally something where you have to be kind of qualified as a priest to be able to communicate with spirits?
Yes, this is something that is. I am from an organized religion, so you have to be ordained to do that.
Okay.
But it's in shamanistic faith, so you have to be someone that is capable of communing with the other world for it to happen, basically. So I kind of channel, like I can basically channel this and enter communication with what people would consider ghost spirits or minor gods and deities.
Now, let me ask you this. Is this something that anyone can eventually learn? Is this an ability that you're born with? How does that work?
No, in most cases you have to be born with with an affinity for it.
Okay.
Usually people that see things or experience a lot of paranormal things or see a lot of things are usually the people that are more qualified to do so, and it runs in families and can manifest itself weirdly or strangely, in the sense that if you had like a great-grandmother that could do weird things, like stop a house fire with just a cup of water. I've heard of that one before. Chances are you might inherit something. So it's something that runs in families.
Now with this ghost, so I mean, it wasn't even see-through, like it was a person standing in front of you, basically.
So for the other people, I asked them afterwards. She kind of looked more like a shade, but for me, she looked like a person standing there, except she didn't quite have a face.
Okay.
Like I just kind of saw.
Was it like a blank area where the face?
Yeah, like a blank canvas.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah.
Did you eventually get her to kind of like realize what was going on?
Well, we got her to calm her down, and I had to explain to her, and I recited several mantras, actually Buddhist mantras, to sort of like calm her down. There are specific mantras made for this, and I had to recite several mantras to calm her down, then explain to her calmly that the revenge she was looking for, it cannot happen anymore because the man she was looking for died roughly 180 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so they basically, and then the family had to call in masons so that they would, break the floor and find the body, and we did find the body.
Oh wow!
It was just bones.
Located the body of the ghost.
Yeah, I located the body, and I told them to dig there, and they dug there. Of course, I did that the next day, but they dug there, and we did find the bones. And then we made a full burial ceremony. A full like a full feast and a full burial ceremony for us that last 3 days, by the way, for something, like something people would do for their relatives in Vietnam. So we gave her the full and proper burials, and we buried her bones, and we gave her a grave, all these things like that in a proper cemetery with offerings. And she was given a place in the family in their family altar, so that family had sort of like adopted her soul into their family.
Huh, okay.
So that she is given a place. Yeah. And then it ended like it wasn't a problem.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have to assume after that she was at peace and everything worked out.
No, she wasn't problematic at all anymore after that.
Huh. What's,
Yeah.
if you don't mind me asking, what's probably the scariest thing that you've seen or dealt with?
Oh, the scariest thing I've seen or dealt with. Well, obviously that exorcism that I told about earlier on was one of the spookier experiences. Because for instance, a spirit of a woman or a spirit of somebody that just has problems with moving on, I can deal with. But, a demon that sort of like possesses people and try to make them kill their own kids, that's pretty far up.
A little more malicious than someone who doesn't know they're dead.
Yeah, it's a lot more malicious than that. So there are also like ghosts and spirits that prank people too, and those can be kind of spooky. But they, especially the spirit of children, like sometimes they know that they're dead, so they just want to prank the shit out of people. That can be pretty spooky, yes.
What kind of,
but it's not.
What kind of pranks do they pull? Like, what do they like? Take you down the stairs?
Okay, here's the thing. Like, my father's driver, and so this is not something I experienced personally, but that's what he told us basically. He was just walking out in the city at the time, and there was a little kid that was crying, like a little, very beautiful little boy, like really like sweet looking thing, who was crying and was complaining that his own that he lost his parents. Mm-hmm. and that he didn't know how to get back home. He knew his house address, but he didn't know how to get back home. So so he said, okay, I'll just take you home then. And after a while, like, of course, he took the kid with him and they walked together. And after a while, the kid started being tired because, well, he was small. So my driver piggybacked him. Mm-hmm. Or is it the other way around? No, it's the person that carries the kid that piggybacks, right?
No, you got it right.
Yeah. Okay, so, and he piggybacked him. And after a while, he felt something wet against the back of his neck.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Something wet and uncomfortable. And suddenly the child grew extremely heavy. Like, really started hurting his back and everything. And he was like wondering what the fuck was up with that. And he turned around just to see not really a child anymore, but the thing was having like a long, red, bloodied tongue licking his back and chuckling.
Oh, what the fuck!
That's...
and its face was basically like, his mouth was so wide, his face was almost split open, and it was licking his back and chuckling. And my driver, he got spooked so bad, he just threw the kid off, or well, whatever it was, off his shoulders, turned around just to see that the thing disappeared. It wasn't there anymore.
Oh my god.
Ha, pranked.
Yeah, totally pranked.
You said wet, and I thought where you're going with it was that the kid was like peeing on him or something. Like,
I was about to relate to that really bad because I've been peed on by my kid before. It
that's
happens.
the worst.
Yeah,
Change a diaper in there.
No.
I've had him on my shoulders, and he just decided to pee on my neck. Yeah, it was great.
No, that's way worse though. Holy shit.
Yeah, I would much rather.
And it wasn't
have the kid have an accident than some giant thing where his head's halfway open and his giant tongue is snaking out. No, I'm good. I'm good.
Yes, and it wasn't. I mean, it was visibly human tongue. Like the thing was really long, and really red, like bloodied, long, snaking out, licking his back.
Gross. Yeah, that would scare the shit out of me too. Yep.
So that's the kind of pranks that these ghosts like to play. I take it.
Like sometimes it's that. Sometimes it can be something else. Like a kid throws a rock at you. You turn around and there's no kid. Yeah.
But they're all fairly malicious pranks, it seems.
No, most of them are pranks. Like they don't mean them maliciously. Or sometimes people just get spooked because they see something really weird, which is understandable.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, even if it's not a malicious ghost, like seeing a ghost is gonna scare most people, like right off the bat.
True.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. A lot of times, I think all a ghost has to do to prank somebody is just show up.
Yeah, just be like, "Hey there." Yeah. Well, that's the whole, like, that's Scooby-Doo and all that other stuff. They hear something and they turn around, the ghosts are like, "Hi," and it's just zoinks, and they're gone. Yeah. So, if I actually saw,
I'd probably do that.
Yeah, I mean, no, it'd be typical Bugs Bunny Looney Tunes, like the outline of me through the wall, on the way out the door. I've never actually seen one, but the more we do this show and talk about ghosts, the more I go back and think about experiences I've had. I'm like, that was pretty scary actually, and I think I might have felt something. But yeah, I think seeing something would have really cemented it for me. And seeing a ghost has got to be one of the scariest.
Yeah.
Things. Yeah. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
And yet you're still seeing something. Or even like you said, you saw that the shadow of whatever that was that came out of when you did the exorcism. That had to be freaky too, just to see that, and there's nothing there, but there's the shadow.
Yeah, I saw the shadow, and some people saw it, others did not. But I saw it very clearly, and there were a lot of people there in that room too. There was like 20 people, 25, who were like just being a crowd and watching what's happening because people are curious, like they want to see what's up.
Were there some people that were looking where the other people saw it that didn't actually see it? You know what I mean? Yeah,
there were people that did not see anything at all, and then there were people that saw exactly what I did. But people felt something weird, like they all felt like a weird chill.
As I've always said, like, I spent the night in a supposedly haunted house, and the whole time I was, completely skeptic of the whole thing, and, I didn't believe it, and of course I didn't see or hear anything. Now, do you think that could be something along those lines, or is that just, maybe just other people are more in tune with that kind of thing?
Well, either the house was not haunted, or you just happen to be one of those people that are very firmly
with your people. Like they were like could have been skeptic. You know what I mean? And that they weren't really. Oh, well, I'll have to go down there and check it out. And then they're like, I don't believe this is happening. She's just weird.
That's a very Western thing.
Okay, so in the East, it's pretty much believed that if there's a ghost, there's a ghost. Or
people actually get.
There's a possession. Okay.
Yeah, and people actually just. It's kind of unilateral. I mean, it's kind of. If you were to ask somebody in the West, roughly 100 to 150 years ago, if they believed in demons and God and things like that, they would say, "Yeah, of course." Like they'd look at you like you're weird if you don't believe in such things. You have to understand it from this cultural context. So. So you have to put it in a cultural context where people actually were raised in these religions and actually believed in them, and religious life has a very strong presence in the culture, and it's permeating. And even people like I went to school with kids that are like trying to be edgy and agnostic, but then they went to the temple to pray for good results for exams. So because mom made them.
There's no such thing as a really like hardcore fedora atheist type in these cultures.
No, I've never encountered someone like that, actually. Until I dealt with, I was in Europe and I dealt with Europeans and stuff like that. I never actually encountered such a person that, a fedora atheist.
Yeah.
None of them have ever read Sterner or anything or any of that? Or...
No.
What sort of other experiences have you had? Anything? I mean, categorically, it all seems to kind of fall into you have exorcisms, people who haven't moved on. Have there been other sorts of things that have happened?
You mean as a different category of things, or just another experience in general?
Just anything else. I mean, I didn't know if you had other things specifically besides exorcisms and things like that.
I was trying to get to heavy.
No, I've had. No, I've never time traveled. Okay, I never. Okay, actually, since I was also serving at the temple, I was also a shaman, and I also did what we would call possession ceremonies, or where I would let myself be possessed by a local deity or whatever people want to, whatever people wanted to honor at the time or what was appropriate at the time. Yes, and I don't remember the experiences. I can just hear from secondhand accounts what I have done during those.
Okay, so it's like channeling. So like you had the spirit enter you, and then once the spirit showed up, that was the spirit until it left, and then you came back, kind of a thing.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. I've heard stories of people in the West doing what's they call channeling. It's very similar. Invocations, yeah. Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah, and that I have done in public settings for in temples during ceremonies. And people would, especially people, if they wanted to commune with a specific god or ask for favors, ask for guidance, they would actually pull in they would request certain things, and the temple will see if they can put up a ceremony or something. And it's usually appropriate to, depending on the dates. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and then there are experiences where I actually even got, not just with, deities or anything, but also with the dead. If family wanted to ask something about someone or what they wanted, they would ask me to enter a trance and let the dead possess me. There's actually a pretty funny story about this one, actually, if you want to hear. So it's not really spooky, but, well, it can be spooky depending on how you put it. But a pretty funny instance was a family that came to the temple, and they asked if they could commune with their dead son, who was 22, 23 when he died in a traffic accident. And I accepted to do the thing. So I set up everything, and then I just completely blacked out after I entered a trance. I just it feels like falling asleep and then blacking out. Okay. Until it's done, when I sort of reclaim my body. And I asked the family, which assisted, which actually saw the whole thing happen. I asked them how it went and things like that. And I saw that their daughter, she was 16, 17, was in tears. She was crying, sobbing. And I was wondering what the heck happened, because, you don't really expect to wake up from a trance just to see someone cry, their eyes out most of the time. And her parents also looked quite angry at her. And, it turns out that the brother, which was possessing me at the time, told her and told the parents that he has been following his little sister and said that she has actually been skipping school to see this boy that was a good for nothing and a sort of a low tier drug dealer gang boy.
Yeah.
And then he kind of told her that if she didn't, break up with him or something, he's going to really spook him or hurt him even. And well, she never told anybody about this. So I suppose if anybody had any doubts about how real the brother was possessing me, I think they didn't have any doubts then anymore, because he said things that only she would know.
Wow. Huh.
And he also said things about, and they also had family had a young child, like 2 years old or something, and apparently the brother has been playing with the child, which kind of caused the baby to laugh at random stuff for no reason.
Huh.
Like just look in the in the emptiness of the room and laugh as if somebody was tickling the baby. So he was saying that he also played with the baby. He said that he followed his sister and basically BTFO'd her and thought patrolled her.
Right.
So there.
That's weird. My kid does that too. The laughing for no reason thing.
That's a
Yeah.
common thing with kids. Sometimes it's weird. You just look and they're just laughing maniacally, and you're like,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
He'll laugh and then spin in a circle for no reason. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, we
go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was saying that we do believe that children are more sensitive to things too.
Oh yeah, definitely. How many people or spirits have you had possess you? Like, how many times have you done that?
Oh, I've done it for 3 years. I think specifically I did temple service for over 3 years, and I showed up once, usually once or twice a month.
Okay.
For these kind of things, especially during the full moon or during different saints and gods and stuff, like different festivals. When it was my time, I had to show up. So we had several priests that would do that, because that's actually kind of tiring and taxing, actually.
Yeah.
Temple service, that's what we call
40 hours a week.
No, it's not. And to most people, they don't. I mean, priesthood in Thanism is, or shamanism in Thanism is that you're still you still have normal responsibilities outside.
So it's
so you have work.
It's not like a. Okay, so it's a part-time thing. Gotcha. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Obviously in the West we have dedicated priests and ministers and pastors and all that. So it's not like a salaried position or anything like that.
No.
Okay.
No, I don't get paid for that.
Right. So it's just kind of a communal responsibility.
Yeah, it's a communal service or a responsibility, basically.
Okay.
It's a religious responsibility.
Right. Huh.
Also, people that are very sensitive to these things, we are told, especially by our elders, to start with doing communal and services like that, because it helps us with controlling our abilities and generally helps us with controlling ourselves, so that we don't end up in some sort of weird spiritual accident or something.
Okay. Do you have? I think we're kind of getting towards the end on time.
Yeah.
Do you have any more, like, if you had to share one story or something like that, what would it be?
Well, my husband has never seen anything weird his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
Until he actually had to deal with me. So I think that's actually a pretty significant experience, at least for him. So I'm just going to say that, we live on a pretty small island out here, and he had an uncle that drowned at sea roughly 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And this experience is significant because, it kind of showed him that there was something really weird going on. And
Right.
It was basically me and him walking on the road. I saw someone walking past us, like a man that was wearing like a sort of like a fisherman's, like an overall, like a weatherproof
Like the big,
thing.
Yeah.
And his clothing was kind of wet. And he just kind of walked there and looked kind of aimless, actually. And it was kind of weird because we live in a small community, so everybody says hello to each other.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the first time I saw him. So I was like, after a while, I just asked my husband, like, did you see that man? Like, is he at odds with your family or something? Is that why he didn't say hello? And my husband was like, what man? I didn't see any man. And then I started describing him to, describing the man I saw to him, and he kind of thought for a while. And then after he showed me a picture, and I did not know at all about that. But he showed me a picture and asked me if that man looked familiar, or if that man looked like anybody in the picture. And I pointed at one man on that picture and said, "It's him."
Yeah.
And my husband said that was actually his uncle that died 30 years ago, and there was no way I could have known about it, because I did not even know that he had an uncle that died at sea 30 years ago.
Huh. Wow.
And I recognized him instantly based on the picture.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So, and he found it kind of spooky, but I found it kind of normal.
Or did your husband see it as well? I missed that, whether you guys both saw it. Were you the only one that saw it, or were were there other people?
I was the only one no, it was only us two on the road.
Okay, but both of you saw it, and okay, that's
no. Andre didn't he didn't see him. I did.
Okay, so
I asked him. That's why I asked him afterwards, why didn't that man say hello to us? And he was like, "What man? I didn't see a man."
Huh. Wow.
Yeah, but then he started having doubts, because I described him, how he looked and everything, and apparently that was how they found his uncle, dressed like that.
Right.
And he drowned, so of course he would be, clothing wet and everything. Yeah, and that's why he asked, he showed me a picture and said if that man, if there was anybody on that picture that looked familiar there. I said, obviously this is your family members, I could recognize I think it was his dad or something.
Mm-hmm.
But then I recognized the man, and I said, I've seen this man before on this island, and he said that was his uncle that died. And that was the man I saw.
Huh.
So there.
That is really kind of creepy.
Okay.
No. Honey, did you see that? No, I didn't see anything. Well, yeah.
Yeah, that happens actually quite a bit.
So you even now you're still seeing ghosts and stuff, even though you're not.
Yeah, I see. It never stops. I mean, just because I had to move and stop temple service doesn't mean that I stop with interacting with, in a sense, the paranormal, because I kind of was always able to see things like that. And that's why my grandmother knew that I had the ability. And that's why she enrolled me in temple service.
So even on a little tiny island, there's still ghosts.
Yeah, I can see things.
Huh. That sounds like
I can see
fun, actually.
Do you ever see things?
Yeah.
I know you mentioned, the exorcism and stuff, but do you ever see things in your day-to-day life that you don't think were people? Any sort of other?
Yeah, I think so. Well, not really out here. I usually, but in some other locations, I actually see strange shapes that, strange crawling creatures that should not be there, like a child crawling around in the dirt in the city. That looked like a child, but wasn't really a child, but it was crawling around, and it shouldn't be there. Didn't belong there, that's for sure. And I'm the only one seeing it most of the time. Some people see it too, but most of the time when I ask people, it's usually only me. But I'm used to that.
You must be in tune with some other dimension or something, or
Well, I don't know, but I've always been like that since I was a kid.
Level of existence or something.
Yeah.
Well, they always say kids can see things, more than adults can, and as we get older, we lose that. I don't know if that's, there's people that say that's due to our the calcification of our pineal gland. There's people that say that you just grow up, and it's put the Harry Potter down and grow up, But
yeah,
you're not seeing anything, kid. But so you trick yourself into believing that they're not there. But it seems that maybe maybe you missed that stage or something. That's actually rather cool, to be honest. I mean, unless they're like really frightening, in which case that would just be horrifying all the time, just to be seeing all these.
No, I mean, when I describe the things that I do see normally, people do find it quite spooky, but I got used to it. So, like, it's like living surrounded with people. You get used to seeing people. I mean, I suppose, the average person's contact with the paranormal is like a person that that is really asocial and agoraphobic, that never went outside of his house, that actually has to deal with people for the first time in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I suppose that would feel like that, so it would be very spooky. But for someone that is, constantly living around these things and seeing them all the time, you just get used to it.
Yeah,
it's like seeing people all the time.
Yeah, it seems like you kind of just get used to it eventually.
Yeah, you do. So.
Okay. Yeah, for me personally, like, if I were seeing this stuff all the time, I'd be more than a little spooked out.
Yeah. It would freak me out after a while, just be seeing these things constantly, and when you, I don't know, like, and nobody else sees it, so I would probably, it sounds like you've come to terms with the fact that you see it a lot.
Yeah. Also, I suppose the first reaction that, if I grew up in Europe or something full time, and I told people what I saw, like, their first reactions would be to check whether or not I had psychological problems.
I wasn't going to say it, but that's, what they do in the West, yeah.
Yeah, but, no.
She's
just
like things, take her to Jew and give her some pills, yeah, so. She's seeing things, and, well, my grandmother sees them too. Oh, okay.
So that's why she's actually an ordained shaman, because that's
right.
Well, that's how we become shamans, is that we actually have some sort of ability since we were young, and becoming a shaman. Yeah, and in Thanism, becoming a shaman would be a necessity then to prevent accidents from happening, because apparently we get preyed on very easily if we don't know how to defend ourselves because of how open we are to the other dimensions.
All right. Well,
yeah.
All right. Well, that was extremely interesting, entertaining, and spooky all at once. That was cool. Thank you for coming on, Julie.
I'm glad.
For sharing all your knowledge with us today.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
It was kind of enlightening for me to realize kind of some of the parallels between a lot of these Eastern systems and a lot of the Western stuff as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed a lot of that. I don't know if that's the West stealing from the East, or if it's
I don't think
the white man just steals everything from everybody. So yeah,
I don't think it's so much stealing. I think it's just coming to the same
to the same conclusion with things like salt works this way, water works this way. I think it's
yes.
Yeah, that's a constant throughout all these different religions, which is cool. It just goes to show you that we're all at certain points, on the same wavelength with some of this stuff. But it also goes to prove that, once again, it's not just white people that see ghosts and have hauntings and possessions and stuff. The Asians too. So it's all the big brain.
We ought to get some fucking voodoo priestess in here.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a voodoo priestess, but yeah, they don't usually see ghosts too much, but it's.
I don't know if they do or not.
They do demon. I know they have possessions and stuff.
Oh yeah, they're big on that stuff.
Big on the possessions and ripping chickens' heads off and stuff. So I don't know. Anyways, well, thanks for coming, Julie. Thanks for coming on. And,
thank you for having me.
Anytime. Scott, you got anything you want to add at the end here?
No, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and time travel makes you gay.
That's right. All right, for the right stuff, .biz. This has been the Paranormies Presents the Ahnenerbe Hour with Scott Taylor and Julie. I'm Johnny Monoxide, and we'll talk to you later.
A young girl is left home alone with only her dog to protect her. When night approaches, she locks all doors and tries to lock all the windows, but one won't close. She decides to leave it unlocked and goes to bed. Her dog takes its customary place underneath her bed. In the deep of night, she awakens to a dripping sound coming from the bathroom. The girl is too scared to go check, so she reaches her hand under the bed she feels a reassuring lick from her dog and falls back asleep. She reawakens to the dripping sound, reaches her hand to the dog where she feels the reassuring lick, and falls back asleep. Once more, she awakens to the dripping sound, and once more, she reaches her hand down and feels the lick of her dog. Now curious about the dripping sound, she gets up and slowly walks towards the bathroom, the dripping sound getting louder as she approaches. She reaches the bathroom and turns on the light. She's greeted by a horrific sight. Hanging from the shower nozzle is her dog, with its throat slit open and its blood dripping into the bathtub. Something on the mirror catches her eye as she turns around. Written on the bathroom mirror in her dog's blood are the words, "Humans can lick too."